Our project started in spring of 2016, I think, when we invited Barry Scheck, co-founder of the Innocence Project, and Luo Bingcheng, who is the founder of the Taiwan Innocence Project, to come with us to China to do a series of talks at Chinese universities, including Public Security University, about the innocence movement, causes of wrongful convictions. As you can imagine, they were both a huge hit. I mean, those of you who've heard Barry Scheck speak know he's a very inspiring speaker. It was great to also have Luo Bingcheng there, who was equally inspiring, but can give his talks in Chinese. So it was a great kickoff to the project, and it was clear from the reception that they got that people in China were incredibly interested in this topic. And just one quick story: when Barry gave a talk to undergraduate students at the Public Security University, it was an auditorium filled with young people in uniforms. I would say there maybe were 250 people there. And he talked about how in roughly 25% of the wrongful convictions in the United States, there was a false confession. One of the students raised their hands and said, well, I did my dissertation on this topic, and I can tell you in China, 100% of the wrongful convictions have false confessions. And that was just an example of the kind of open dialogue that got started with this program. So we did, the program had two categories of activities. One was very intensive workshops at NYU, which included some site visits. Here you see the group visiting the DNA lab at the New York State Office of Chief Medical Examiner. This is an interrogation room. This is not an actual photo we took. I just took this from the internet. And then a visit. We not only visited Judge Marcus in the Bronx, but we also visited federal court. This is the group in the Eastern District. So site visits were an important part. I think people were really impressed with the DNA lab. Sorry, Amy, I couldn't find the picture of you in lab gear. Another component was we had over 60 experts come and talk to the group. I couldn't put everybody's picture, but I wanted to put a representative sample of some of the photos of some of our experts who talked to the group. Here's a list of more folks. I mean, we really had the top experts, not just from the country, but internationally, come and talk to our group about how it is that police interrogations sometimes lead to false confessions, how it is that this passes for scientific evidence, bite marks and other kinds of evidence actually have no scientific basis at all, and yet they're accepted in courts all the time. We had criminal defense lawyers who work on these cases come and talk to the group. We had prosecutors, especially prosecutors from conviction integrity units, several judges, and the group always spent at least one day at the Innocence Project hearing presentations from all of the various sections of the Innocence Project who work on these cases and who work on criminal justice reform, as well as kind of public information. Also, I wanted to note, every program we had a couple of exonerees come and talk to the group, and these were some of the most moving presentations. Derek Hamilton, Shabaka Shakur, Yusuf Salam, Marty Tenkloff, and Kevin Richardson. They came and they talked about their cases and their experiences. And, you know, sometimes all of them are actually quite knowledgeable about criminal law in the United States, especially in New York. I think Marty Tenkloff is now a lawyer. But to hear people talk about their own experiences of being wrongfully convicted was incredibly moving. And also informative. I think one of the takeaways from this group was how prison libraries made a huge difference for folks who were in jail, who were fighting to be exonerated. And one of our Chinese colleagues after this presentation went home and wrote a long article, which he circulated widely, that advocating that Chinese prisons should have law libraries. So that's just an example. That wasn't something we necessarily anticipated out of this project, but some of the things we did that are a little bit different, maybe from other programs, is we had time, almost a half day with each speaker. So our people were able to ask whatever questions they wanted and get answers, express their opinions. In all of these kinds of programs, there is a language issue, even though for this program, we only accepted people who had good facility with English. There's always, I mean, some of these talks are quite technical, and to make sure people were understanding what was said, folks like Amy and Allen prepared detailed notes and then shared their notes with the group. Amy's notes for the first program in Chinese ended up on WeChat and spread throughout China, and brought a lot of attention to our program. We also included periodic sessions with just the attendees, just to talk to people, make sure they were digesting the information, they had an opportunity to ask questions. And then at the end of each workshop, each participant presented their own work to the group. So that was one series of activities. The second was a lecture series in China. So we brought 2 experts on every trip to talk about different topics. These are some of the cities we went to. We always went to 2 or 3 places and visited 4 or 5 law schools. This is just the folks who came with us, Aaron Murphy and Brandon Garrett. I won't read through all of these, but we had a heavy focus on false confessions because that's such a big issue in China. But we also talked about cognitive bias, use and misuse of DNA evidence, and junk science. And a lot of these talks attracted huge attention. And this was also done at a time when it was particularly challenging for U.S.-China exchanges to go forward. But we were very much welcomed by our Chinese partners, and the program's got a lot of attention, both with physical attendees and also some live streaming of our programs. This is just a couple of examples of pictures of our speakers and some of the posters that were displayed around campuses advertising the program. I added these pictures just because they're kind of fun. Some of you may recognize Andy Griffiths. I'm happy to report he was not arrested or interrogated in China, but we were invited to visit a police station where interrogations take place, and he was testing out a chair that's used for detainees who are being interrogated. The other picture is just an airplane on the tarmac of a little town none of us ever heard of, where we got stuck one night as our flight to Beijing we couldn't fly to Beijing, so we were sent to a tiny little airport in the middle of a thunderstorm. Just to say, not everything always goes according to plan on these trips. Just some quick numbers. We originally only planned to have a small number of people come to our workshops in New York, but a lot of people heard about it and contacted us and wanted to come. And over the 4 years, we had 78 experts from Asia come and participate in those workshops. We had about 500 people come to our lectures in China. One of our participants, several of our participants do lawyer training back in China themselves. And one of them told us that he's trained over 3,000 Chinese criminal defense lawyers and used some of the materials from our program, including the film Central Park 5, which we were able to put Chinese subtitles on with the permission of the filmmakers. And this over 153,000 hits for WeChat posts from one of our lectures. So people in China were really interested in this content. I would say the same is true for Japan and Taiwan, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. These are some of the publications that came out of the project, often kind of organically. The West 4th Street Diary was written by one of now the director of the Taiwan Innocence Association. We didn't know he was doing this, but after he came to our first month-long program, he wrote a detailed summary of it and published it in Taiwan. And we only found out about it later. This is just, all right, I'm really doing well with time. I've got 2 minutes left, so I'm going to talk a little bit about this and then turn it over to Chert. So this issue of evidence science, several of our participants one year decided that they would take what they learned in our program at NYU and publish an entire issue about wrongful convictions in this Chinese legal magazine called Evidence Science. Some of them were translations of important articles that they had read in English. Some of them were their own research. This third article is an article in the important prosecutorial daily about video recording of interrogations in the United States. So these are just some examples of kind of what we sometimes call the multiplier effect of our programs, that folks took what they learned here and shared it with their own cohorts.